Every life is a story, every moment a chapter. Here on Slow English Stories, we pause to listen.
Today we have a tale of mystery.
It features the world's most famous detective.
A king asks him for help.
But the case involves a brilliant and beautiful woman.
This is the story of how Sherlock Holmes met the woman.
The carriage wheels clattered. They rolled over the slick, gaslit cobblestones of Baker Street. The sound was rhythmic. It was a damp and quiet March evening.
Dr. John Watson walked down the street. His coat collar was turned up against the chill. His steps slowed as he passed a familiar door. It was number 221B.
Since his marriage, his life had changed. It had a comfortable, domestic rhythm. It was very different from his old friend's energetic rooms.
He had read about Holmes's recent adventures in the papers. The summons to Odessa. The strange case of the Atkinson brothers. But reading about it was not the same.
He felt a keen, sudden desire to see the man again. He wanted to witness that extraordinary mind at work.
He glanced up at the window. A tall, spare figure passed twice. It was a dark silhouette against the blind. The figure's head was sunk on his chest. His hands were clasped behind his back.
It was the old sign.
The restless pacing of a mind with a new problem.
Watson smiled to himself. He stepped toward the door.
The room was just as he remembered it. It was a controlled chaos. There were chemical tools, stacks of books, and case files everywhere.
The air was thick. It had the sharp, familiar scent of Holmes's strong tobacco.
Holmes himself was not an emotional man. But Watson saw a quiet gladness in his friend's keen gray eyes.
He waved Watson to an armchair. He threw his cigar case across the room. He pointed toward the spirit case in the corner.
Then he stood before the fire. He looked his friend over in his unique, thoughtful way.
"Wedlock suits you," he remarked. There was a flicker of amusement in his voice. "I think, Watson, that you have put on 7.5 pounds since I saw you."
Watson laughed. 7, he said.
"Indeed, I should have thought a little more. And you are in practice again, I observe. You did not tell me you intended to go back to work."
"Then how do you know?" Watson asked. The old sense of baffled admiration returned.
"I see it, I deduce it. How do I know that you have been getting yourself very wet lately? And that you have a most clumsy and careless servant girl?"
"My dear Holmes," Watson said, "this is too much. It is true that I had a country walk on Thursday. And I came home in a dreadful mess, but I have changed my clothes. As for Mary Jane, she is incorrigible, and my wife has given her notice. But again, I fail to see how you know."
Holmes chuckled softly. "It is simplicity itself," he said. "My eyes tell me that on the inside of your left shoe, the leather is scored by 6 almost parallel cuts. Someone has carelessly scraped the edges of the sole to remove crusted mud.
Hence, you see, my double deduction. You had been out in bad weather. And you have a particularly clumsy servant.
As to your practice, if a gentleman walks into my rooms, smelling of iodoform, with a black mark of nitrate of silver upon his right forefinger, and a bulge on the right side of his top hat where he has hidden his stethoscope, I must be dull if I do not pronounce him to be an active doctor.
Watson could not help but shake his head. It was always the same. He saw the same things as Holmes, yet he failed to observe.
His friend's explanations made the process seem ridiculously simple. Yet he knew that his own eyes would never see the world with such piercing clarity.
It was this quality, this ability to turn the mundane into a chain of irrefutable logic. It made Holmes the most perfect reasoning and observing machine the world had ever seen.
By the way, Holmes said. His mood shifted back to the problem that had occupied him. Since you are interested in these little problems, you may be interested in this.
He threw over a sheet of thick, pink-tinted notepaper. It had been lying open on the table.
Watson picked it up. The paper was stiff and expensive. The message was printed in stark, blocky letters.
A gentleman will call on you tonight at 7:45. He wishes to consult you on a matter of the deepest moment. Your recent services to a royal house show you can be trusted. Be in your chamber at that hour. And do not be surprised if your visitor wears a mask.
This is indeed a mystery, Watson remarked. What do you imagine that it means?
I have no data yet, Holmes replied, lighting his pipe. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. One begins to twist facts to suit theories, instead of theories to suit facts.
He examined the note again. The man who wrote it was presumably well-to-do. Such paper could not be bought under £0.50 a packet. It is peculiarly strong and stiff.
Peculiar, that is the very word, Holmes mused. He held the paper up to the gas lamp. It is not an English paper at all.
Hold it up to the light, he said. Watson did so. He saw a watermark woven into the texture. A large E with a small g, a P, and a large G with a small t.
What do you make of that? Holmes asked. The name of the maker, no doubt, Watson replied. Not at all, Holmes said. The G with the small t stands for Gesellschaft, which is German for company. P, of course, stands for papier. Now for the EG.
Let us glance at our Continental Gazetteer. He took down a heavy brown volume from his shelves.
Iglo, Eglinitz. Here we are, Igria. It is in a German-speaking country in Bohemia, remarkable for its numerous glass factories and paper mills. Ha, my boy. What do you make of that?
His eyes sparkled. The game was afoot.
Just then, they heard the sound of horses' hooves. They pulled to a sharp halt on the street below. This was followed by the slam of a carriage door.
The carriage was drawn by a pair of magnificent animals. They were far too fine for a typical London cab. A client of some importance, Watson noted.
Indeed, Holmes said, a thin curl of smoke rising from his pipe. Shall I leave, Holmes? Watson asked. Not a bit, Doctor. Pray stay where you are. I am lost without my Boswell.
A moment later, a step was heard upon the stair. Then their visitor entered.
He was a man of immense stature. He stood well over 6 feet 6 inches tall.
His dress was marked by a richness. In England, it would be considered bad taste. Heavy bands of astrakhan fur decorated his coat. A deep blue cloak was lined with flame-colored silk.
He wore boots trimmed with the same rich fur. He carried a broad-brimmed hat. But the most striking thing was the black, visored mask. It covered the upper part of his face.
He entered with a commanding presence. His deep, harsh voice echoed in the small room. "You had my note?" he asked with a German accent. "I told you that I would call."
Holmes nodded. Pray take a seat. This is my friend and colleague, Dr. Watson. He occasionally helps me in my cases. Whom have I the honor to address?
"You may address me as the Count von Kram, a Bohemian nobleman," the man replied. "I understand this gentleman is a man of honor and discretion, whom I may trust with a matter of extreme importance. If not, I should prefer to communicate with you alone."
Holmes stood and placed a hand on Watson's shoulder. You may say before this gentleman anything which you may say to me. The Count bowed his head. Then you must both swear that the matter will be secret for 2 years. At present, it is so important it may influence European history.
"I promise," said Holmes. "And I," said Watson.
You will excuse this mask, the visitor continued. The august person who employs me wishes his agent to be unknown to you. And I confess that the title I just used is not exactly my own.
"I was aware of it," said Holmes drily.
The man started in surprise. The circumstances are of great delicacy. Every precaution must be taken to stop what might grow to be an immense scandal. It could compromise one of the reigning families of Europe.
"I was also aware of that," Holmes murmured. He settled back into his armchair and closed his eyes.
The visitor looked from one to the other in bewilderment. Finally, he seemed to make a decision. With an impulsive gesture, he tore the mask from his face. He threw it upon the ground.
"You are right," he cried. "I am the king. Why should I attempt to conceal it?"
Indeed, said Holmes. Your Majesty had not spoken before I was aware that I was addressing Wilhelm Gottsreich Sigismund von Ormstein, Grand Duke of Kassel-Felstein, and hereditary King of Bohemia.
The king, for it was he, sank into a chair. He passed a hand over his high, white forehead. "The facts are briefly these," he began. His voice was now laced with a desperate urgency.
Some 5 years ago, during a lengthy visit to Warsaw, I made the acquaintance of the well-known adventuress Irene Adler. The name is no doubt familiar to you.
Holmes sat up, his interest piqued. "Kindly look her up in my index, Doctor," he said.
Watson pulled out the heavy volume and found the entry. It was brief. Born in New Jersey in 1858. contralto singer, prima donna at the Imperial Opera of Warsaw. Retired from the operatic stage. Now living in London.
Precisely, the king confirmed. To this woman, I wrote some compromising letters. And there is also a photograph.
À cabinet photographe.
Holmes prompted. Yes, the king replied. And you were both in it? The king flushed.
Yes.
We were.
Oh dear, that was a serious indiscretion, Holmes said with a clinical detachment. Your Majesty has compromised yourself seriously.
I was mad, insane. But I was only crown prince then. I was young. I am about to be married to Clotilde Lothman von Saxe-Meiningen, the King of Scandinavia's second daughter. Her family is the very soul of propriety. A shadow of a doubt as to my conduct would bring the matter to an end.
And Irene Adler? Holmes asked. She threatens to send them the photograph, the king said. And she will do it. I know that she will do it. You do not know her, but she has a soul of steel. She has the face of the most beautiful of women, and the mind of the most resolute of men.
He explained that he had tried everything. His agents had burgled her house 5 times, but found nothing. He had offered to pay for the photograph, but she would not sell. He was at his wit's end.
The announcement of his engagement was to be made public in 3 days.
You must have this photograph, Holmes said simply. I must, the king pleaded. He pulled a heavy leather bag from under his cloak. He placed it on the table.
There are 300 pounds in gold and 700 in notes. I would give one of the provinces of my kingdom to have that photograph.
And the address? Holmes asked, his eyes gleaming. Bryony Lodge, Serpentine Avenue, St. John's Wood.
Holmes scribbled it down. Good night, Your Majesty. I trust that we shall soon have some good news for you. And good night, Watson. Pray call upon me tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock. I should like to chat this little matter over with you.
The following day, Watson arrived at Baker Street.
Holmes was not there.
The landlady said he had left early that morning. He had not yet returned.
Watson settled into his friend's armchair by the fire and waited. He contemplated the strange case.
The power of a simple photograph to derail European history was a testament to the rigid codes of the age. The king was not threatened with violence. He was threatened with the ruin of his reputation. That was a far more potent weapon.
He was deep in thought when the door opened. A drunken-looking groom shambled into the room. He was ill-kempt and had a bloated, red face.
He nodded curtly at Watson. He disappeared into Holmes's bedroom. Watson stared, perplexed. The man re-emerged minutes later, dressed in his own tweed suit.
He had a mischievous twinkle in his eye.
Watson realized he had been completely fooled.
Ha! Holmes laughed, enjoying his friend's astonishment. A little touch of theatricality is a valuable thing in our line of work.
He explained that he had spent the morning in the guise of an out-of-work groom. He had been haunting the stables around Bryony Lodge. There was no better source of information than the gossip of stable boys.
He had learned that Irene Adler was a quiet, respectable woman. She kept to herself. She had one regular male visitor, a handsome, dark-eyed lawyer named Godfrey Norton. He called every day.
And then, Holmes continued, his voice quickening with excitement. The most remarkable thing happened. Norton himself arrived in a hansom cab in a great hurry.
He rushed into the house and emerged 20 minutes later with Miss Adler. She was just as agitated as he. They hailed two separate cabs. Both shouted the same destination, the Church of St. Monica, Edgware Road.
Sensing this was a critical moment, Holmes had leaped into a third cab and followed.
He arrived to find their two cabs waiting. Inside the church, a bizarre scene was unfolding. Irene Adler and Godfrey Norton stood before the altar, but the clergyman was refusing to marry them.
It seemed they needed a witness. And who do you think they dragged in from the back of the church to serve that purpose? Holmes asked, his eyes dancing. The disreputable-looking groom who had just wandered in.
He had found himself, quite unexpectedly, an official witness. He was a witness to the marriage of the very woman whose secrets he was hired to uncover.
Watson was stunned. So she is married. Then the king's photograph is no longer a danger to him. A married woman would not seek revenge on a former lover.
Holmes smiled, a strange, enigmatic expression on his face. That is what one might think, Watson. But the situation has become more, not less, delicate. And now I shall need your help. Are you prepared to break the law?
My dear fellow, I am at your service.
Excellent. The plan is simple, but it must be executed with precision.
An hour later, they were in a cab, heading for St. John's Wood. Holmes was once again transformed. He now wore the clothes of a simple, amiable clergyman. He had a broad black hat and a slightly threadbare coat.
He explained his reasoning as they went. A woman's hiding place for a treasured object is rarely where a man would look. The king's burglars had searched the house and found nothing.
Therefore, the photograph must be in a very clever place. A place where only she could retrieve it quickly. His goal was not to search the house. His goal was to make her show him where it was.
He handed Watson a curious object. It was a plumber's smoke rocket. A 6-inch cardboard cylinder. When lit, it would produce a dense cloud of smoke for several minutes.
Your part is crucial, Watson, Holmes instructed. You will wait in the street, opposite her sitting room window. When her carriage returns, there will be a small commotion. I will be carried into the house. They will open the window to give me air. At that moment, when you see me raise my hand, you will throw this into the room. And at the same time cry, "Fire." Do you follow?
Watson nodded. His heart began to pound with a mixture of fear and excitement.
They arrived at Serpentine Avenue as dusk was falling. It was a quiet, peaceful street. The windows of the neat villas glowed warmly in the fading light.
A small group of rough-looking men were loitering on the pavement. They were smoking and laughing. Holmes exchanged a quick, knowing glance with them.
At that moment, a smart little carriage drew up to the door of Bryony Lodge. A woman stepped out.
As she stepped out, the loiterers surged forward. They created a mock fight to be the one to open her carriage door.
In the midst of the scuffle, Holmes, in his clergyman's disguise, rushed forward. He acted as if he were protecting her. A second later, he fell to the ground with a cry. A smear of red coloring was on his temple.
The woman, Irene Adler, was clearly distressed. She was a magnificent creature, with a face a man might die for. Showing a deep compassion, she insisted that the injured clergyman be brought into her home.
Watson watched from the shadows. He saw Holmes being carried inside. He was laid upon a couch in the sitting room.
The gas lamps within cast a soft glow. He saw Irene Adler's concerned face leaning over Holmes. As instructed, a servant opened the window to let in the evening air. Then Watson saw it, the signal. Holmes's hand was raised.
Taking a deep breath, Watson struck a match. He lit the fuse of the smoke rocket. He hurled it through the open window.
"Fire!" he screamed. His voice cracked with the effort. The cry was immediately taken up by the actors on the street. They began shouting and running in a convincing display of panic.
The room filled with thick, billowing smoke. Through the haze, Watson saw a fleeting movement.
Irene Adler, her face a mask of alarm, made a single instinctual dash. She went to one side of the room. Her hand went to a sliding panel just above the right-hand bell pull. It was only for an instant, but it was enough.
A moment later, Holmes's voice cut through the din. He declared it a false alarm.
He staggered out of the house. He met Watson at the corner. His face was alive with triumph.
"You did admirably, Doctor," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "It was perfect. We know where the photograph is."
He explained his simple but brilliant logic. When a woman's house is on fire, her instinct is to rush to the thing she values most. He had seen her movement. Now the prize was within his grasp.
They would return with the king in the morning. They would retrieve the photograph before she suspected a thing.
As they reached the familiar door of 221B, their victory seemed assured. Suddenly, a slender young man in a long coat hurried past them. As he did, a clear, musical voice called out into the gloom. "Good night, Mr. Sherlock Holmes."
Holmes stopped dead. He whirled around, but the figure had already vanished into the darkness. Watson saw a look of utter astonishment on his friend's face. It was an expression he had never witnessed before.
"I've heard that voice before," Holmes muttered, staring into the empty street. But where? The confident energy of their walk home had vanished. It was replaced by a sudden, chilling sense of unease.
For the first time, Watson felt a flicker of doubt. The hunter, it seemed, had just become the hunted.
The next morning, the King of Bohemia arrived. His royal impatience was barely contained. The three of them set off at once for Bryony Lodge.
They were met at the door by a stern-faced elderly woman. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" she asked. Holmes nodded. "My mistress told me you would be likely to call," she said.
She and her husband left this morning on the 5:15 train from Charing Cross. They are going to the continent. They do not intend to return.
A wave of shock passed over them. The king let out a cry of despair. Holmes, however, brushed past the servant and strode into the sitting room. He walked directly to the secret panel above the bell pull and slid it open. The king lunged forward. He let out a groan. It was empty.
"No, wait," Holmes said calmly. "There is something." He reached inside and drew out 2 items.
One was a photograph, but it was not the compromising picture of the king. It was a portrait of Irene Adler alone. She was dressed in a stunning evening gown.
The other was a letter. It was addressed in a firm, clear hand. "Sherlock Holmes, ESQ to be left till called for."
Holmes broke the seal and began to read aloud. "My dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes," it began. "You really did it very well. You took me in completely. Until after the alarm of fire, I had not a suspicion. But then, when I found how I had betrayed myself, I began to think.
I had been warned against you months ago. I had been told that if the king employed an agent, it would certainly be you. And your address had been given me. Yet, with all this, you made me reveal what you wanted to know."
Even after I became suspicious, I found it hard to think evil of such a dear, kind old clergyman. But, you know, I have been trained as an actress myself. Male costume is nothing new to me. I sent John, the coachman, to watch you, ran upstairs, got into my walking clothes, and came down just as you were leaving.
Holmes paused, and Watson saw a faint smile touch his lips. The voice in the night was explained.
I followed you to your door, and so made sure that I was really an object of interest to the celebrated Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Then I, rather imprudently, wished you good night, and started for the temple to see my husband. We both thought the best resource was flight.
As to the photograph, your client may rest in peace. I love and am loved by a better man than he. The king may do what he will without hindrance from one whom he has cruelly wronged. I keep it only for my own protection. I leave a photograph which he might care to possess. And I remain, dear Mr. Sherlock Holmes, very truly yours, Irene Norton née Adler.
When Holmes finished, there was a long silence. The king's face was a mixture of relief and chagrin. "What a woman! Oh, what a woman!" he cried. "Did I not tell you how quick and resolute she was? Would she not have made an admirable queen? Is it not a pity that she was not on my level?"
Holmes's reply was cold as ice. From what I have seen of the lady, she seems, indeed, to be on a very different level to your majesty.
The king, his problem solved, was exultant. He offered Holmes a magnificent emerald snake ring from his finger as payment. But Holmes shook his head.
Your Majesty has something which I should value even more highly, he said. You have but to name it. This photograph.
The king stared at him in amazement. Irene's photograph, but certainly if you wish it. He seemed almost pleased that Holmes's fee was so modest.
Back in their rooms at Baker Street, Watson watched. Holmes carefully placed the small cabinet photograph of Irene Adler on his mantelpiece.
He had failed in his mission. The compromising picture was gone, forever beyond their reach. Yet, he had achieved his client's objective. The king was safe.
But Watson knew that for his friend, the case represented something far more profound. Holmes, the cold, precise reasoning machine, had been outwitted. He was outmaneuvered and thoroughly defeated by a woman's intellect.
And he had found in that defeat a mark of respect so deep that he would never forget it. He used to make merry over the cleverness of women. But Watson never heard him do it again.
And for Sherlock Holmes, though he felt no emotion akin to love for Irene Adler, there would always be one woman and only one who stood apart from all her sex. To him, she was always simply the woman.
And that is how Sherlock Holmes, the great detective, was defeated by a woman's wit.
He never forgot Irene Adler.
To him, she was always the woman.
Thank you for listening to Slow English Stories.
We hope you join us for our next tale.